When the Defence Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, told you, "Jo uchit samjho wo karo," what was your interpretation like? Did you feel, as an army chief at that time, did you feel abandoned? Or do you believe there could have been more clarity or less of an ambiguity from the government when it came to China in 2020?
It is not a question of abandonment, and I don't know who has started using that word.
When Rahul Gandhi waived your book, which is officially not released, and said that the Modi government deserted you, you do not agree with that reading of the opposition.
No, not at all.
Do you think that the government had perhaps something to hide, that they didn't want the people to read as far as your memoir is concerned?
You can see the glass half full, you can see it half empty. If you always want to see it empty, always in a negative manner, then no amount of convincing or justification will make you change your views.
Pulwama, 14 Feb 2019, Pahalgam, 22nd April 2025. So would you agree that these two attacks were a result of a major intelligence lapse on the part of our security establishment?
There will be some gaps in the information, there will be some gaps in the response. So these things are bound to happen from time to time.
In today's episode, we take you inside India's armed forces, the stories behind some of the rules, protocols, myths, and the mysteries. From rank and appointments, the significance of a salute with Jai Hind, to the story of Badluram, a brave soldier whose spirit lives on 82 years after he was killed in action. All this and much more is the focus of a new book. It's called Curious and Classified: Unearthing Military Myths and Mysteries. The book is published by Rupa and written by General Manoj Naravane, a decorated officer with an illustrious career spanning over 4 decades. General Naravane was the chief of the Indian Army from December 2019 to April 2022. Earlier today, we got a chance to speak with General Naravane on his new book, Operation Sindoor, The China Threat, and yes, that book too. His unreleased memoir, 4 Stars of Destiny, that was and perhaps continues to be at the center of a huge political controversy. General Naravane has given some very candid and interesting answers, so do watch this interview till the very end. Hello and welcome. I am Shubham Chauhan. Let's get started. General Naravane, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with me. It's an absolute honor and privilege for me to be doing this conversation with you. Congratulations on your new book. It's called The Curious and the Classified: Unearthing Military Myths and Mysteries, your second published book. I want to cover a lot of ground with you through the course of this interview, so I'll get straight into the questions. Tell us how this book came together when you say you're unearthing military myths and mystery. Walk us through the process of putting together this book, sir.
Well, first to you, Shubham, thank you very much for hosting me on your show. And it's always a pleasure for any author, I think, to talk about his book. Every book is like a baby. So we are only too glad to talk about it and the entire process. So as I mentioned in the introduction, the idea of a book of this sort came when I happened to be glancing at Shashi Tharoor's A Wonderland of Words. I had just browsing through it, and the chapter I happened to be land on was on backronyms, which is like sort of invented acronyms, sort of reverse engineering. And the example he gives in the book is of SOS, which really didn't mean anything. It was just a distress signal, but it people added words to it, and it became "Save Our Ships" or "Save Our Souls" in the era of Morse code. And when I read that, immediately that thought came to my mind that we have a lot of backronyms like that in the army also. Prime example of that being Mhow. It's a town near Indore which has a lot of military presence. And somebody invented the backronym that it is the military headquarters of war. So, which it is not. So that's why it's a myth. So that's why this myths and mysteries. And let me tell you that people even today believe that it stands for military headquarters of war. which is actually all bunkum. So that
Right.
is where that thought came to my mind, that if a book can be there on idiosyncrasies of the English language, why not one on such things about the armed forces? And it's debunking, it's unearthing certain myths, it's talking about some other well-known things. But when I was putting together these chapters, like the chapter of or the idea of a chapter on Mhow came immediately to my mind. Then when I thought about it more, started jotting down what more things could be talked or written about, and discussed it with my friends, my army friends. Many of them didn't know any of these stories. It was as if it was some deep dark secret, and it really surprised me that so many of my army colleagues who have had 15, 20 years, who have spent in the army, didn't know about it. And even now, after the book has been published, some of my batchmates who have read the book, they also ringing me up and saying, "Oh, सच्ची ऐसे भी था, ऐसे भी होता है." Yeah, so it was a surprise then, and it is a surprise now, and that's how this book came about, and that's why the title, "The Curious and the Classified: Unearthing These Myths and Mysteries."
Right. It's. I'll come to Mahu because that's a topic that's quite close to my heart. I've written it down as well. But if you just take a look at this book, I think for the audience, for even a civilian or an army personnel, the book is informative. It's thought provoking, and of course witty and humorous in equal measure. So it was a breeze just reading through 25 different
Yeah.
myths and mysteries that you've sort of declassified, if I were to use that word. So I want to start with the chapter on military salutes. It's, as a civilian, you talk about it very casually. You see it in the police, you see it in films, you see it in the army. You've made a very clear distinction, and you've written in detail as to how the army, air force, and the navy have different styles of salute, and the Jai Hind that is followed with a salute started with the air force, and then it came on to the army and the navy. Could you tell us more
That's
about that story?
Well, the origin of the salute itself is shrouded in a little bit of mystery. That how did this uh, custom of saluting come about? Some trace it back to the gladiators and the salute they used to give in the arena when they used to fight other gladiators and fierce animals. But that salute was an outstretched arm. That was not the salute as we see it today, with the palm of the hand or the hand touching the brow of your head. Some people say it originated during the times of knights in their shining armor, when they would raise the visor of their helmet to show their face and show to the others that they are, they are friends. So that act of taking the visor up becomes a sort of salute that we see today. Uh, it also was that empty palm means I'm not carrying a weapon, so there's nothing to fear from me. So there are various interpretations of the salute and how it came about, but none of them are really chronicled, or there's no absolute reference which says that it originated in this manner, in this era, or was introduced by so and so king or general. It is just something which has evolved probably when armies started operating together to show respect to one another. So that is how the salutes probably came by. And the army, navy, air force also have their own styles of saluting. It is not common. But a
Right.
salute, and I must impress upon this on all our viewers, because a salute is a mark of respect. It is not an act of subversions or servility. It is an art of respect. When a junior salutes, he's saying that I acknowledge you, and I acknowledge that you have the authority over me, and I will follow your orders even to the peril of my life. And every salute has to be returned. It's not that the junior salutes and you just ignore him and walk off. The junior salutes, you have to return that salute, which in equal measure means that I acknowledge that respect that you have given me, and I will also never let you down. No, that is how it translates.
Right.
As far as the aspect of Jai Hind is concerned, the salutes were never accompanied by any verbal salutation. That too came about much later in the army, as Ram Ram or Jai Hind, not Jai Hind, Ram Ram or Sat Sri Akal, which my regiment says, or just a normal good morning, good evening, sir, as the case may be. It is the Air Force who introduced or started saying Jai Hind many years ago, of course, now. And slowly, steadily, that has now become the normal salutation uh, across all the services, and which is a good thing because by that itself it fosters bonhomie and esprit de corps.
Right. Let's move on to a story that I found really interesting. It's about the Bangalore Torpedo. You've written that in the annals of military innovation, few devices have had as enduring and global an impact is this. So, what is the Bangalore Torpedo? What does it have to do with the city of Bangalore and a torpedo? Can you just talk us through that?
In fact, it's quite interesting that most Bangaloreans would also not know that there is such a weapon system named after the city. And even more intriguing is why torpedo, because torpedoes you normally associate with ships and and the sea. So Bangalore being very much inland, so both the things are actually a sort of mystery. The Bangalore torpedo was nothing but a cylindrical tube. It was a crude innovation, more like a jugaad, as we would say today. It was a crude innovation, just a cylindrical tube filled with explosives, which could be detonated remotely. And this was developed in the times of the First World War. And the First World War was characterized by a lot of barbed wire obstacles through which the infantry had to assault, and invariably they would get stuck in the barbed wire and then get picked off, like pigeons in a chute. So this engineer officer from the Madras Engineering Group, which MEG, is still there in Bangalore, in fact, and they have a whole section in their museum dedicated to the Bangalore torpedo. So he got this idea of filling this tube with explosives, and a number of these sections, each 4 to 5 feet long, could be attached together. So one section could be carried by one man, but after being inserted into the barbed wire, you could attach one more section, push it further, 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 as much as you could. And then when it detonated, it cleared a safe passage through the barbed wire. And it was first used in the First World War, this crude invention. Thereafter, over the years, it has got patented, it has become more sophisticated, and then it was used in Second World War and is still in use in armies worldwide. So that is how an invention born out of necessity is still there today.
Right. Let's move on to Mhow. It's a town you touched upon in your first answer. It's a place I love going to every year. And as a civilian, when you enter that cantonment atmosphere, and each year there's something new that I discover. And when I read your chapter, it just added more to my knowledge repository, starting with the fact that it is not military headquarters of war. For the longest time, I thought Mhow is the military headquarters of war. So tell us about this town. It's now called Dr. Ambedkar Nagar. It's a few kilometers away from Indore in Madhya Pradesh. Your book talks about the town itself, the cant, and the civilian area. For an outsider, for someone who doesn't know about Mhow, how would you put in context or in perspective the importance that Mhow has?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that it never was the military headquarter of war, because the headquarter in British times used to be at Shimla, from where the commander in chief controlled all the operations right from Afghanistan to Singapore. That was the spread of his command. But Mhow as a garrison town came about as a result of the Anglo-Maratha wars. And when the Holkars were defeated, they were made to shift their capital from the banks of the Narmada to Indore, which was just a plain area with no defense potential as such. And to keep an eye on them, the Mhow garrison was established. And that is how Mhow started becoming a military encampment. At some point of time, it also housed the 5th Indian Infantry Division in the British times, again in the period of the First World War, which was, of course, disbanded once the First World War got over. But slowly and steadily, because of its location and advantages of climate and other things, army units started getting stationed there, starting with the School of Musketry, which went on to become the infantry school. That was followed by the MCT, the Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, and last but not the least is the Army War College. So there are substantial amount of military presence, and because of that military presence, it's not odd for people to think that probably it was headquarter of some importance, but that is not so. And of course, because there is so much army there, the army depends on the civil population for its sustenance, the normal day-to-day things, vegetables, milk. There's so many of these education institutions, they need their regular supply of stationery, colored pens, post-it notes, and what have you. And officers always had to be well turned out, so there are so many tailoring shops. In fact, the tailoring shop, oldest one, is also established in the 1800s. That is how old that. And I think there is not a single person who doesn't have a suit which has been stitched in Mhow, including myself. So it has got a long, military tradition, and both these, the town and the cant, they coexist, and there is absolute. It's like a symbiotic relationship that they have. And visit to Mhow, I think, is very well worth the while. Not only because it's the birthplace of Dr. Ambedkar, but there is a wonderful museum there uh, maintained by the infantry school about the entire history of the Indian Army, and it is a well-known tourist attraction also. It's very well worth a visit.
Absolutely. Um, One of the most fascinating stories for me out of the 25 chapters that you've written in the book is the story of Badluram, a rifleman who was killed in the Battle of Kohima, and yet he was someone that didn't go out to become a hero, but eventually ended up becoming one. Who was Badluram, and what is the entire story as far as he's concerned?
Yes, I think the story of Badluram is one which almost everybody likes it a lot because it's quite strange by itself. That and he's lived on in memory. He's become a hero. So Badluram was an ordinary soldier in the Assam regiment, who in the Battle of Imphal and Kohima dies in the very early stages of the battle. And I would also like to say that this Battle of Imphal and Kohima is ranked amongst the top 10 military battles in the entire British history, not just the recent one, but right from 300 years ago. One of the top 10 battles, and that is where, in the Battle of Kohima and Imphal, that the Japanese advance was finally stopped. And once they started going back from that, they were continuously on the way back. So before I come to Badluram, I would like to make this point that the each story also informs about history. It is not just anecdotal. It does tell about the past and connects the past to the present. So Badluram was this soldier who dies in the initial days of the battle, but the quartermaster, whether by accident or design, forgets to take his name out of the total strength. So the rations which are supplied to each and every unit, those rations keep coming for the entire company, including this person who has died some time back. And when finally as part of the Japanese advance, when the company gets totally surrounded and no more supplies are forthcoming, it is this one man's extra ration which has accumulated over that period of a month or so that enables them to sustain themselves and beat back the Japanese. Later on, when the war was over, English gentleman, he coined a song, borrowing the tune from another English song. They coined it a song Badluram Ka Badan. And the words of that are roughly that Badluram ka badan zameen ke niche hai, that he is dead and gone. लेकिन उसका ration हम खाते हैं. So it's part morbid but part amusing also. And it is set to a very lively beat. And the Assam regiment has adopted that as their regimental sort of song. They perform it at various functions of theirs. It is there on YouTube channels, TikTok. You can just Google it. You'll find it. A very peppy song and real morale booster. And it has even gone abroad. So that is the story of Badluram. He didn't perform any heroic act. He was just one more nameless casualty. But his name lives on. In fact, probably much longer and more well known than others who would have performed heroic acts in battle.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, the book is not just historical. This book also has some really nice illustrations in each chapter. There's very nice illustrations that capture the essence of the chapter. So, be it about the ranks and appointments, where you explain that ladder of how the Army, Navy, and Air Force hierarchy works, or the chapter on Badluram. Each chapter is a very nice illustration to it, and that's something that I liked when I was reading the book. General Naravane, I would like to come to some of the other aspects as well that have been making headlines. I know you've been constantly and repeatedly asked about it, but I will still go ahead and do that. If you may, I want to start with Operation Sindoor. We are talking in the month of May. Operation Sindoor has completed 1 year. For me, for my generation, that has not seen Kargil, Operation Sindoor was really the first major India-Pakistan conflict. As a former army chief yourself, what is your assessment of India's performance in Operation Sindoor, General?
Well, I think before Op Sindoor, we had the surgical strikes after Uri, and we had the Balakot strikes after the terrorist attack in Pulwama. Why I mention these is to put Op Sindoor into context so it can be better understood. After the earlier two terrorist strikes, we had limited our response to terrorist infrastructure or small camps astride the border and only within POK. This time, after this very horrific attack which happened in Pahalgam, we broadened the canvas and we said we will not distinguish between the terrorist, the supporters of terrorists. We will not distinguish between state and non-state actors. So this was a very big inflection point and the change in our entire philosophy. And it is a very important change which has driven home a lesson that you're not going to be safe anywhere, and which is what the Raksha Mantri implied when he said कि घुस घुस कर मारेंगे, that if you do something like this to us, you cannot take this fig leaf of deniability or plausible deniability that I don't have control over them, that these are just misguided people who have gone and done something in your country. Why are you blaming us? We are ourselves victims of terrorism. And those kind of. So we have very clearly said that something happens, all of y'all will be equally to blame. So that is the major change which happened, and I'm very happy to say that the Army, Navy, Air Force all combined executed this retaliation of ours in a very precise manner. And this retaliation was not only precise, it was punitive, but more than that, it was proportionate. That is the key point, that we did not widen the ambit to the extent that you see which is happening in other wars which are going on, be it in Ukraine or Hamas in Gaza or in Iran. We restricted it to those terrorist headquarters, and once the Pakistan military retaliated, to those military targets only. So Because of this, our standing in the world has gone up, that we are a responsible power. People understand our pain, they understand the need that was there for us to retaliate and not just take this as just another run of the mill terror attack, and they appreciate the fact that we hit, and when Pakistan approached us for a ceasefire, we accepted that ceasefire on our terms when we were in the ascendant.
Absolutely, and I think I couldn't agree more with your analysis, and the valor of the armed forces that was on display during Op Sindoor was, I think, marvelous to see. But at the same time, you mentioned about Pahalgam and Pulwama. Pulwama, 14th Feb 2019, Pahalgam, 22nd April 2025. So, would you agree that these two attacks were a result of a major intelligence lapse on the part of our security establishment?
No, whenever something happens, we are quick to jump to the conclusion that it is an intelligence failure. Well, yes, when an attack happens, it happens as a result of so many factors which are there. But we have to remember that for every attack which happens, there are probably 100 which have been foiled, which nobody comes to know. That time, no, we don't blow our trumpet that we have spoiled this attack, we have spoiled that attack, because that would give the game away. So we just foil the attack and keep quiet. But one, just like one catch will be dropped in a game, same way one attack will slip through. So you can't suddenly jump to that conclusion of intelligence failure. Yes, there will be always cracks. There will be some gaps in the information. There will be some gaps in the response. So these things are bound to happen from time to time. But we should not straight away start blaming anyone or finding fault. Everyone is doing a difficult job under very difficult circumstances, round the clock. Remember, security forces have to be on guard 24/7, all 365 days of the year. The terrorist has to just get in once for that 10 minutes, 365 days into 60 minutes. Just imagine how alert we have to be all the time. The terrorist just has to find one 5-minute slot. So it's unfair to make these kind of comparisons or statements that it is a failure. Everybody is doing their best.
So you're saying it's not a failure. Calling that would be an extreme. It was like a slip up. That would that
Yeah,
be an
some
appropriate way to put it?
these things will happen, and it's not that a terrorist attack will not happen in the future either. Everyone will keep learning from every incident that takes place. Certain debriefs would have been carried out. Certain lessons would have been learned. Loopholes would have been plugged. But as I said, it's a cat and mouse game. You plug 10 loopholes, the enemy will think of a 13th way of doing things. So
Right. Uh,
it is always a continuous
right.
process.
I take your point, sir. I want to draw your attention to a statement you made last week. This was in Mumbai. You batted for India-Pakistan dialogue. For our audience, I'll just read out a quick quote. You said, "Ordinary citizens generally do not have much to do with politics. When friendships develop between the people of two countries, it naturally helps improve relations between the countries themselves." And then you go on why people-to-people contact is more important. In context of the statement you made, do you believe that, given the nature of Pakistan, do you believe that talking it out or dialogue really would be the way to go if we have to solve this problem?
Well, Kautilya had said, that various means to deal with an adversary: Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. The Sam is talks, negotiations. Dam is, impose costs or bribe. Dand is what we did, the punitive strikes. Bhed is, you sow divisiveness, information war in modern parlance. So all four are, arrows in your quiver. All four are strategies. None of them is standalone. None of them is sequential. It is not that you have two of them cannot operate together. But ultimately, if the guns have to fall silent, you have to talk. Aren't Iran and US talking even while they're fighting with each other? So, a settlement. For the guns to fall silent, you have to talk. So who will you talk with? You will talk to the powers that be who rule that country. The powers that be who rule their country will look after the interests of their people. So how do you know what is making their people tick? So there is no harm in talking it. We are not talking from a position of weakness. We are talking from a position of strength. But as I said, at some point of time, I'm not saying today, I'm not saying tomorrow. At some point of time, you have to start talking to reach a settlement. So and if I'm not saying in isolation, there were, even before I made this statement about 2 weeks back or a week ago, newspaper articles are happened that track two dialogues are happening, that retired bureaucrats and senior military officials have met of the two countries. Even the places were mentioned that these people have met. So track two dialogue is on. So there is nothing wrong in having this. It is like a fallback option. It is a another route. And as I said, these are all stratagems that have to be adopted. Sam, Dam, Dan, Bhed, all of them in one form or the other, together or individually.
Right. Let me address the big question that which you have answered, but yet people are still curious and still want to know more from you. It's your unreleased memoir, Four Stars of Destiny. General Naravane, when the Defense Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, told you, "Jo uchit samjho wo karo," what was your interpretation like? Did you feel, as an army chief at that time, did you feel abandoned, or do you believe there could have been more clarity or less of an ambiguity from the government when it came to China in 2020?
Well, you can't take that statement in isolation, because after all, you have been discussing this issue, the Galwan clash, what is happening, our response, their responses to that. There have been regular meetings going on. And at that, after its certain juncture, then this directive came that do what you think is the best possible under the circumstances. And I think it is a very mature decision to give the chief the free hand to do what he feels is the best under the circumstances. It is not a question of abandonment, and I don't know who has started using that word. At no point the it was a whole of nation effort. The political side, the diplomatic, the home ministry, the armed forces, we were all in it together. And because we were all in it together, you knew what impact each of your decisions will have, and that they cannot be taken in isolation. And I think the government only showed the faith that it has in the armed forces, that whatever decision they take will be in the best interests of the country.
Right. So you're saying a section of the political class in India, particularly the opposition, when Rahul Gandhi waived your book, which is officially not released, and said that the Modi government deserted you, you do not agree with that reading of the opposition.
No, not at all. And if you can see the glass half full, you can see it half empty. If you always want to see it empty, always in a negative manner, then no amount of convincing or justification will make you change your views. So, as I said, I think we came out, actually, at the end of the day, we came out on top of the situation, and we forced the PLA and China to withdraw, which they have never done ever.
Right. General Naravane, since we are talking books, it's called Book Show, and we are on the topic of your memoir. Help me understand this. Now, in the last 1 year, we've seen books on Operation Sindoor that have come out. They have been given the go ahead and they have been released. Whereas, on the contrary, your memoir, which talks about China, which talks about the Agniveer scheme from 6 years ago, that has been withheld by the government. In fact, just for our viewers, I'd like to show this report in the Indian Express, which says that between 2020 and 2024, the Defense Ministry cleared 35 books. Yours, General Naravane's book, was the only one that was pending. And what added to the curiosity and the mystery was that after your book extracts came out in the media, the MOD said that this book has to be withheld and should not be published. Now, would you do you think that the government had perhaps something to hide that they didn't want the people to read as far as your memoir is concerned?
No, I don't think there's anything to hide in that sense. However, as I've mentioned earlier in other places, there was no intention on my side to write a memoir in the first place. And when this came about that I should write something about my life and career, I relied quite heavily on my own memory and my own recollection of events, and drew my whatever data and I wanted from reports which are published in the press and which were available online. So obviously it not going to be 100% accurate. There could be different interpretations of various events, uh, and therefore if there is a reason to review those interpretational events and how who said what at what point of time, I don't think there's anything wrong for a review to take place. And two people can have a totally different perception of how a particular event transpired or how a meeting took place. Two people coming out of a meeting, one might say it was very good, one might say it was very bad. so, so from that perspective, if certain chapters of that need to be reviewed, and it could quite be, that after all, when you write a book, you have written it at your level, a person, but there may be many more nuances at a level higher than uh, the chief of army staff, uh, which might have other, subplots or connotations to it, which need more deliberation. So all these things are quite possible. We should not read too much into it. At some point of time, I'm sure that the review will be undertaken, will be completed, and those portions or parts which may not be suitable for release today, I'm sure it will be suitable for release in some point of time. So that's how I see it. I
So you are
enjoyed,
hopeful that the
I
government will
enjoyed,
clear the book
I
and it will
enjoyed
release.
writing the book. That's more than enough.
So yes, so you're hopeful that this book that has been currently withheld by the MOD will come out.
Yes, certainly it will come out.
Okay. Let's come to the penultimate part of this interview, and I want to talk about China because whoever I spoke to, once I told them that I'm interviewing General Naravane, everybody told me in unison, former army personnel and my colleagues as well, that you must ask him about China. There are two very clear questions that I have about China, and I'm asking that as a layman. You were, of course, in the hot seat in 2020. A basic question that occurred to me is why was China, or what was China trying to do what they did in 2020? What was their intention when you were in that hot seat? What was your analysis? And the second part is, as a section of commentary in India would claim that India has lost territory to China. How accurate do you think these statements are?
Let me kill that second point first. No territory has been lost whatsoever. And unnecessarily, this point is being raised again and again and again. The Prime Minister of the country has said no territory has been lost. The Defense Minister has said that. The Army Chief has said that. If you don't want to believe anyone, I cannot make you change your views. But let me categorically say, without any doubts in my mind, that no territory was lost. So let me put that to rest once and for all. Now, as far as these issues on the boundary are concerned, we have to understand that this is a more than 3,000-kilometer long undemarcated boundary. And in this 3,000-kilometer boundary, both sides have different claims. We feel that the boundary runs at a certain point. China feels that the boundary runs at a different point. So, those overlapping claim lines are where these disputes arise. And these disputes have been happening in the past and will happen in the future till such time that this boundary question is not resolved again through talks. No, you can't say that China did this, so you don't talk to them. How will you resolve the problem? You have to resolve the problem through talks, and through these talks, arrive at a boundary which recognizes the legitimate concerns of both sides. And towards that end, in 2004 or 2005, there was an agreement signed between China and India. It was called the Political Parameters and Guiding Principles for the Resolution of the China India boundary dispute, boundary question, not even dispute. Even the heading did not call it a dispute, it called it a question, boundary question. And in that political parameters and guiding principle, three, four very good points were given that uh, as and when these negotiations happen, the importance of geographical features will be kept in mind. The interests of settled populations on both sides of the boundary will be kept in mind, and so on and so forth. There are three, four key points which actually form the framework on which to build and carry forward these negotiations. So these negotiations have to be done. You have to talk to be able to solve a problem. We as a country have always said that resolve your differences through dialogue, not through uh, unilateral use of force. And that has
Right.
always been our endeavor that the force should be the last resort. First, talk and try and resolve things. So, once again, the talks on this boundary question are happening between the special representatives of both the countries. On our side, it is our NSA, and from their side, it is their foreign minister, Mr. Wang Yi. So these talks will happen, and the more you talk, the more the differences get narrowed down. If you don't talk, you will always remain far apart. As you talk, you talk differences, and then ultimately you will find and come to a solution which is acceptable to both sides. And one must always remember that for a settlement to be successful, it must be win-win. Both sides must think that we have walked away the winner. Only then are negotiations successful.
Absolutely. My last question to you, General Naravane, we've spoken about your new book, we've spoken about China, Pakistan, everything. If you look back at your long and illustrious career in the Indian Army, if there was one rule, convention, or some aspect about the Indian Army that you would like to change, or you think this is too outdated, this doesn't suit the army of today, what would that aspect or rule or convention be?
Well, there was one thing in which change which I started, which I'm very happy to say that my successor took that one step even further. Uh, in earlier days, after colonel rank, you became brigadier so and so, Indian Army. You shed your regimental affiliation. You were no longer Brigadier Naravane Sikhalai or Brigadier so and so Rajput regiment. You became Indian Army, showing that as a general officer, because brigadiers are also brigadier generals, one star rank. So, as a general officer, you have to rise above these regimental issues and go forward and look at the army as a whole. And this sort of parochialism must go, or what we call in the army the lanyard culture, the color of the lanyard which you wear. So I made a very modest beginning of bringing about that change, which General Manoj Pandey, I'm glad to say, took it forward. And now brigadiers and above do not wear a single insignia on the uniform from which their regimental sort of affiliation or identity, right from the cap to the rank badges to the belt buckle, everything is standard for brigadiers and above, and that is how it should be. General officers must look at the army as a whole, and not of their regiment or their arm and service, that infantry or armored or artillery, or your Indian army now. You have to see the future and the interests of the army as a whole, not of your branch or subunit or department. So that is,
Right.
I think, a change which I initiated and which has taking root slowly and steadily.
Right. On that note, General Naravane, thank you so much for taking out the time from your schedule and speaking to us. It was lovely to hear your thoughts, candid as always. To our viewers, I'd just like to show this book once again. It is by General Manoj Naravane, The Curious and the Classified, Unearthing Military Myths and Mysteries. Do get your hands on this book, because I think if you're a civilian, if you're a military man, it doesn't matter. You must read this book, because it gives and it puts in perspective a lot of things that we see from the outside as far as the army and the Indian Armed Forces is concerned. It's available online on Amazon. It's available at your bookstores as well. So do grab a copy. And General Naravane, thank you so much for speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobham. Welcome anytime.